All right, let's learn some knots, shall we? Now, if you are one of these people who cannot remember how to tie knots and when to use which knot, good news, I gotcha. In this video, I'm gonna show you the most essential knots that can get you out of any situation and techniques how to tie them super fast and in a way that you will not forget how it's done. All right, let's begin. If I would ask you to tie the most simple knot you can on the rope, you would do something like this. And if you tighten this, you will get an overhand knot. Now, if you would do the same, what we just did, and wrap the tail once more, you get something like that. And if you tighten this and dress it well, you will get a double overhand knot, which is also known as a stopper knot. So this is the knot that should always live at the end of your rope, and it's obviously used to stop your rope from slipping through your belaying device and dropping your climber to death or yourself. All right, let's continue. Make a gun with your right hand and place the rope like so, where the gun is pointing towards the end of the rope. Now take the rope and wrap around your fingers like so and make an X here. Wrap the rope again and put the tail through the X, like so. So now, if you look into this, you will notice that on one side we have two parallel strands, while on other side we have an X, and the rope is going through the X. If we tighten this, we get a double overhand again, or a stopper knot again. So in full speed, it looks something like this. And if you would want a triple overhand, you make an X, and then you make one extra loop, kind of like extra X, and put the tail through both of them. Like so. So you would get a triple overhand knot. Okay, let's make a gun again. And previously we had the gun pointing towards the tail. This time we flip it around. The gun points away from the tail. And we will tie the same knot as before, where we go once, make an X, and now we make a bight and put this bight through the X. Like so. If you tighten this, you should get exactly the same knot, which has two parallel strands on one side and an X on the other side. So this knot is a sliding knot. If I load it, it slides until it cannot slide anymore. So this is really great knot if you need a tight connection to some object. For example, in rope access, it's very commonly used to hook to the carabiners. It prevents the carabiner from flopping around or cross-loading. Plus, this knot is very, very small and compact, so this might be very useful in certain rigging situations where you need to get very close to your carabiner. Now, one really important aspect about this knot is that it's pretty much impossible to visually check it. That's why you have to do a function test, meaning take your load line and pull. The loop should get smaller and the knot will tighten. If you tied it incorrectly, as you pull on the load line, this is what happens. The tail will slip out. And this is called a death knot for a reason. And death knot basically happens when, during the tying, if you point your gun towards the tail. So instead of that, as I showed you before, you point away from the tail, and then you will get a knot which functions properly, but always function check. Now to tie this knot around an object, take the tail, and then you start wrapping this tail around the rope, like so. So you go once, and then when you go second time, you form an X here. And now you want to take the tail and pass through the X, as always. Tail goes through the X. And since this knot consumes very little rope, I like using it as a stopper knot tied to my red end of my rope bag. So a great little knot but the biggest disadvantage of it is if you load it really hard, you will have really hard time untying it. In this case, when you have a carabiner, it's okay because you can unclip from carabiner and then it's much easier to untie. However, if you would tie onto some object, then it's another story. All right, let's make another stopper knot, but this time don't make it tight. Leave a little hole here so you can stick your finger through. However, instead of sticking my finger through, I'm gonna stick another rope through. Now I'm gonna tighten the orange knot a little bit. And now here is the trick. Notice the last strand on the orange knot on the right side. So it's this one, and it kind of goes that way. So the trick is to start tying the green knot the same direction. If I go the other direction, it's not gonna be good. So I go the same direction, I cross over itself, which forms an X as always, and then I put the tail under the X as always. So if I tighten the green knot, I tighten the orange knot, and now if I pull them together, they come together and form a knot which looks like this, where I have 4 parallel strands on one side, and if I flip it over, I have 2 X's. 1, 2. So this knot is called double fisherman's knot, and it's because fishers use this knot to join their fishing lines. However, in fishing lines, since they're very skinny and slippery, they often use triple or quadruple version of this knot. While in climbing, it's obviously a great knot to join 2 ropes. It's really secure. You can use different diameters of the ropes. However, one disadvantage of this knot is that, same as with scaffold before, if you load it really heavy, it's gonna be hard to untie. And of course, there are other knots for joining 2 ropes that are even better in certain situations. I will cover them in future episodes, but for the basics, double fisherman's is what everybody should know. Okay, next is the king of the knots, a figure of 8. And there are 2 versions of this knot. And if that's something new for you, I've already made a video showing you my ninja method how to tie this knot and in a way that's easier to untie. Now, if you know how to tie figure of 8 into your harness, you also know how to tie it into some other object. So you follow the same procedure of follow through. So in case you don't want to use a carabiner here, this is a great option. So the method where you tie into your harness or you tie around some object is called a figure of 8 follow through. However, there is another way to tie a figure of 8 when you want to do this in the middle of the rope. And as you can see, this method is really fast. Okay, so this method is actually easier to show than to explain, but I will try to do my best. So I have a loop here with the tail at the bottom of my palm. It's not here, it's here, like so. And now I will have to whip this tail. And this is how it looks. You whip like so. Now at this point, notice the hole where this thumb is poking through. And use the left hand to take this tail under and through that hole where the thumb is poking through. And I use my index finger of the right hand to come and help to pull it through. Pull it through. And at this point, this strand, which goes to the tail, sometimes wants to be on this side, but actually it needs to be on the other side. Now, if you tighten everything, so the tail strand needs to come kind of on top. If this is bottom, it needs to come on top. And if that's the case, you will get a perfect figure of 8, which is also going to be easy to untie because the load line, this line, goes in the middle. So real life speed looks something like this, where I just need to fix this strand sometimes a little bit. So this way of tying figure of 8 is called figure of 8 on a bight. So basically you need a secure attachment point on the rope, figure of 8. Now when it comes to safety, you don't need any stopper knots for figure of 8, but this tail should be at least 10 centimeters long. So basically 1 fist or longer. In my case I have 2.5 fists, so it's more than enough. And if you would have a thinner rope, you can obviously proportionally have this tail shorter. Alright, now let's learn about hitches. Now if you're wondering what's the difference between a hitch and a knot can hold its own shape without any external objects needed, like figure of 8, while a hitch cannot. So this is holding me, but if I remove this external object from the hitch will fall apart. Okay, let's start with the cloves hitch. Take the rope with the right hand, like so. Now the left hand crosses under the right hand and takes the rope like so. Notice that the thumbs are pointing away from each other and I have a little bit of rope slack between the hands. Now at this point, uncross your arms and you will get something like this. Now the right loop goes in front of the left one, like so. So once again, I cross my arms, I uncross them, and then the right loop slides on top of the left one, and then you clip this to your carabiner or any other object, like so, and then you can pull on the ends to tighten it. Now what's great about this hitch is that you can pull on either side of the rope and it's gonna hold. And if you want to adjust, you loosen the belly in the middle of the knot, like so. Let's say I want to stay at this length, so I'm gonna pull the other end now, like so. And I'm secure. So this cross and uncross technique works really well when you have 2 hands. And if you don't have 2 hands available, this is what you do. You clip the carabiner as always, normally. Now, since the gate is pointing to the right, I'm gonna use my right hand and I'm gonna flip it upside down with the thumb pointing down and take the other rope, which is behind the carabiner. At this point, I'm gonna untwist my hand and clip it to the gate. And screw the carabiner. Now, when the gate is pointing left, you need to use your left hand. So the same, flip it upside down with the thumb pointing down, grab the rope, untwist your hand, and clip it to the gate. And cloves hitch is another great knot if you like playing with sticks. It holds really well. I guess this will get a lot of comments, right? A great visual check if you did it correctly. Both strands that exit the hitch need to exit from the middle of the knot. So they are both kind of squeezed inside and they're exiting on the opposite sides. There is a rope between them. Okay, next hitch starts exactly the same as before. But at this point, instead of sliding the right loop over the left one, imagine that you have a book in front of you and these loops are kind of like pages of the book and you want to close the book, like so. So here is another angle. I cross my arms, I uncross, and then I close the book. Now what I'm doing here, I'm twisting this like so before I'm clipping to the carabiner. And the reason for this twist that I did is to keep the break side of the rope, this one, away from the gate, so that this rope, when it's running, it's not running over the gate. So when I load, the knot will flip, this is totally normal, and then I can go down like so. And as you might have guessed, this is the knot or the hitch that you would use in case you would drop your belaying device and now you need to go down. So take a bit of slack, like so. Now, one thing to know about this hitch is that the most breaking strength it has when these strands are parallel to each other. It's not down here like on normal belaying devices. It's actually up in the case of a rappel, like so. So, like so, and then you can lower yourself down. So hopefully you will never need to use this, but in case you do, close your book or pray. That's also a good way to remember. You can also belay a climber using this. One thing to know about that is that when you're switching between giving slack and taking slack, the knot will flip upside down. This is totally normal. So it keeps flipping every time you switch taking slack to giving slack. That's how it should be. Another very critical thing to know is that it will twist your rope like crazy. So this is not the best knot if you want to rappel a lot. You will have a lot of tangles in your rope. So in case of emergency, once again, cross your arms, uncross, and then pray. And before you go down, don't forget to test it before you unclip any other protection. All right, moving on to friction hitches. These are special hitches that can slide on the rope, but when you load it, it bites. And this is super useful in wide variety applications, from backupping your belaying device to rigging something where you need to tension the rope more, or rescuing somebody or yourself. And I'm gonna show you 3 most common hitches, but don't worry, they're kind of similar. So I'm gonna explain the differences so you can understand in which application which one is better.
All right, let's start with the Prusik. The first thing I do when I tie Prusik is move my loop to the side a little bit. Then I pass the knot through itself, like so, and make it tight again. Then I pass the knot one more time, like so. Notice that I'm keeping these coils coiling inwards towards each other, like here. And then I pass a 3rd time, like so. Now at this point, I want to pull on one of these strands to offset the knot. So I'm gonna pull on this strand while maintaining the knot neat. So that's the end result. Now to double check the Prusik, you can kind of see a big smiley with the tongue. And all the coils are nice and parallel to each other. There is nothing overlapping here.
And you can clip it to yourself, like so. And it should hold you. Now, Prusiks are not releasable under tension. And when you load it hard, it might be hard to release. And to help to release, you kind of want to open that mouth that I was talking. And that helps to loosen up the Prusik. So Prusiks are very strong and they work in both directions. So if you're not planning to move it much in certain rigging situations, this is great.
All right, next one is a Klemheist. For this one, I like to offset the knot from the beginning and then take the other end behind the rope, kind of measure 1 finger here, and then you start rolling around or wrapping around or coiling around. This is much easier than original Prusik. And at this point, you take the knot, pass through the upper loop, like so, and pull it down. So again, it's important to make it very nice and tidy. And also to make sure that this loop that you just passed your rope through is not longer than entire length of the knot. Of course, when you're gonna load it, it's gonna stretch, and that's okay. But if you make it too long, you will have way less friction.
All right, the Klemheist. Same as the Prusik, it's very strong and not releasable under tension. However, unlike the Prusik, well-tied Klemheist should be easier to release. And similar to Prusik, when you want to release it, you want to open this lip that you passed your tail through. That helps to loosen it up. Now, unlike Prusiks, Klemheist is single directional, so it works best if you pull it downwards in my case. It kind of works if you pull up as well, but it's not designed for that and it's gonna be much weaker. So due to the fact that it's a little bit easier to release sometimes and it's holding very strong, a lot of climbers prefer this knot over the Prusik when you need to ascend the rope. So you can move it easier up and then load it, move it up and then load it.
All right, and the last one is an Autoblock. It starts similar to the Klemheist. I like to offset this knot a little bit and then start wrapping around like we already did before. And now at this point, instead of putting the knot through the loop, what we did with the Klemheist, you want to take both of these loops and clip it with the carabiner. So once you load it, it's gonna look a little bit funky, but it should grab.
And Autoblock is commonly used as a backup for your belay device in extended rappel situation. So since it doesn't bite that much, it's still okay because you don't need that much force to hold the break side of the rope. However, the ability to release this knot under tension is what it makes it a great option for rappelling. So here's another demonstration. Autoblock, although being the weakest out of the three, it still can hold my weight. However, if I pull on it from top down, it will, ow. Now, the great thing about these Prusiks that they can be made simply out of the accessory cord tied into the loop using double Fisherman's knot. One thing you need to know is that your cord has to be at least 3 millimeters thinner than the rope you're gonna be using it on. And in general, the thinner the cord is, the stronger the Prusik is gonna grab. And for climbing applications, the good diameter is between 5 and 6 millimeters. Now, other things that affect how strongly the Prusik is gonna bite is the amount of loops you're gonna make. So with every Prusik you can loop it as many times as it's needed. There is no hard rule. Usually you start around 3 and then you have to test it to see if it's strong enough but not too strong. So it's a great idea to test on your own ropes because it also depends on the stiffness of your cord and on your slippiness of your rope. And if your rope, for example, is wet or frozen, it's gonna be even slippier, so you might need more wraps. Also, you can tie Prusiks on 2 ropes. For example, when you're rappelling, the thing you need to know is that 2 ropes have more surface for the Prusik to bite, and usually the Prusik will bite harder, so you might need less wraps. So, it's very budget-friendly and super useful thing to have. But you can also buy already pre-made Prusiks. They are even better because they are more friction resistant, they are softer and it's easier to tie them. However, make sure to not buy too thick one. They are used for other applications. You need a thinner one for sport climbing. And in case you get stuck on the route and you want to escape but you don't have a Prusik, well, maybe you have shoes with laces that you can make your Prusik out of. And here I forgot to mention one very important thing about Prusiks, that you should not rely on them fully. You always have to have a very, very solid backup. All right. So, of course, there are many other knots, but to keep your brain from melting, I'm gonna keep them for the future episodes. And for now, I wanna say special thank you for Mammoth for sponsoring this video, since I put a lot of energy into these videos to make them as quality as possible. It's great to partner with the brand who also cares about quality a lot. So thank you, Mammoth. And thank you every single of you who are supporting me by visiting my website. That helps a ton, so I can make more of these videos. I'm so bad at these outros. I'm gonna leave it like that.